seem to be like any fundamental difference of temperament or psychology. Different groups believe in different things, and they want to change it such that you get to their goals, right? Doesn't feel like a
I think
fundamental.
that's well, but I don't think that's I think that's reductive because like the conservatives are always clinging on to something,
Okay.
something from the past that they're carrying forward and protecting. The progressives, I think, are not always doing that. I think I mean, you can find these narratives are broad in general, and so you're always gonna find manifestations of them that overlap and touch and all that stuff. But like the progressives are like, hey, we have the power of rationality, right? We can move beyond the structures that have hitherto held us back, right? It's like, now I get your point. Is like, well, the progressives want to burn things down and build something new, and the conservatives want to burn things down, build something new. But like the new thing that's being built is something preserved, like Christian ideals or European heritage or something like that. Whereas the progressives, it's like it's the new man philosophy, right? We can build something. We are free from constraints of the past. The thing they're building is new in like a fundamental sense, whereas the conservatives, the thing they're building is rejuvenating something that's already been there.
Okay.
And this is obviously broad, and like you said, MAGA clearly does not fit into this all the time, or at all. But that is, I would say, that's at least how I understand the fundamental temperamental differences.
Okay, I feel like that's an understandable way of characterizing it. And I did have another question, but I'm not sure
Go
if
ahead.
my answer was like too bad.
It's sufficient for now. Go ahead, hit me with your final point of contention or question.
The other one, I'm not really, isn't really like to argue about it. I'm just not sure what
Okay.
your position is behind it. You seem, at least from, that's the vibe I get, that you're not like super like pro foreign intervention in defending like countries like Ukraine or Taiwan or intervening in their favor. That's the vibe I get. I'm not sure.
Yeah. That's your vibe, as usual. The vibes are correct. Good job.
Well, thank you. So why is that? If I could get you.
Because I need someone to make the case why my tax dollars and my fellow Americans lives should be put at risk for some foreign
Wow,
country.
this is lagging.
The idea that
Holy cow.
it's bad.
I don't know if my
for the
internet's fast
influence
enough
of
for this.
Bad ideologies like Chinese communism.
Can I close
and
any app
Russian,
applications?
Imperial things to take over the world. That seems like a decent.
That was exactly what the people who wanted to and did invade Vietnam said.
Sure. That's also the same thing as the people who wanted to invade Germany and Korea and those things seem to turn out okay.
Right. Fair enough. So that rationalization in and of itself doesn't mean anything, because you could end up fighting Germany, and that's the right thing to do, or you could end up invading Vietnam, which was not the right thing to do. So that rationalization is not enough.
Work, right?
Huh?
It wasn't the right thing to do because it didn't work. I'm not sure Vietnam would be a bad place if it had been successful.
I wonder if I can pop
could
into
have been just
history.
like Korea today. Might be a better place. It just
I don't know if I wouldn't call Korea a success either.
well, it's probably better than Vietnam, right? It's probably better than
Yeah, low bar, fair. But my broader point, you understand what I'm saying, is I, as an American, living in a democracy, a sacred democracy that Trump is threatening, fuck that guy.
Potentially being.
I
sent
have a
over
right to
say,
for example, fight Iran.
fuck
Because Israel wants to engage in
tax
their,
dollars
and subtly
US
of land that
military
isn't
personnel
theirs,
potentially
although
being
according to
sent
their
over
magical
to,
book, for example,
God
fight
promised it to
Iran.
them.
And of course,
Because
every
Israel wants to
every
engage
Israeli
in
will
their-
tell you. Well, that has nothing. That has nothing to do with why we support Israel's taking over of Judea and Samaria. Sorry, West Bank. Nothing to do with the Bible at all. Of course, the Jewish religion is fundamental to the Jewish ethnicity, but not in this case. It's fundamentally separate. I find that laughable. And I do not want my tax dollars going to Israel to start a war that I don't think we should be involved in.
Well, yeah, I'm not like questioning whether you have a right to want or not want your tax dollars to go to a certain place. Obviously,
Thank
you
you.
do. I'm just asking why. Like, there's a rationale behind it.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
The
Like,
rationale
why-
is until someone makes a compelling, convincing case for why my tax dollars should go to a foreign country, my default answer is no. They don't leave my country.
You don't think there's a convincing case for
I've not heard one yet.
Ukraine from Russia?
Not really. No. All the rationales I hear are not particularly convincing.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I was just curious about
Yeah.
like the position more
It's fair.
than.
And I'm not necessarily trying to convince anyone else of my opinion. I'm just explaining why I have the opinion that I do.
Okay.
Cool?
All right.
All right. Thank you, Matthias. Good luck getting out of that prison cell that you're in.
I will try. Thank you.
All right.
For the
Godspeed.
rest of the story.
Peace on earth. Okay. Whoops. Oh, sorry. Gerard. Good thing you weren't naked. All right. I'm gonna bring Gerard on in 3, 2.
Hello.
Hello. Is
You
that a
hear me?
gun? No, that's a microphone.
microphone.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
I'm
Okay.
really
so
worried as what we're about to witness on the stream. Okay. Go ahead. We've already had. One
I'm
person
British. It
with
should
a
be
gun.
obvious I don't have a gun.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Your government has castrated you guys.
Okay.
What is up?
So I don't know how many questions I can ask, or I should just jump in straight away to the things I disagree with you on.
Oh, hit me. Let's go straight to the things that you disagree with me on.
Okay. Well. Okay. So, my contention is specifically with the the thing you find the most important, which is
testing.
centrism.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I have a suspicion that when it comes to politics and when it comes to how like society is organized, there is many different ways that can be stable, right? So if you look at nature and you look at animals, right, and the way they evolve, then you have like different body plans, different ways they're organized. And it's not like one specific animal is better than the other, or one specific organizing. But the moment an animal, for example, decides you have like a crocodile that suddenly wants really long legs, that could work for other animals, but it doesn't necessarily work for crocodiles, right?
Sure.
And so I think to some extent, you can't find a middle ground, and you can't find how things connect together, because it can either work completely in one way or completely in another. And then when you look at human psychology, you realize that many things don't work unless, especially when you look at culture, many things don't work unless people are entirely dedicated into one way of living or one way of practicing their lives.
No, I disagree with that. I don't think that's true.
You disagree with that? Go ahead.
I think that stable, successful societies strike a balance between maintaining the things that have worked from the past and updating and adapting them to meet the needs of the modern changing environment. Like, you have to ground yourself in the traditions of your culture to some degree. I mean, even just language, to even use words in a language, which is a fundamental part of human culture, is to ground yourself in a tradition.
Oh no, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so this an example would be you have an animal and it has a certain body plan. Okay, would be like looking at its like the way it was built in the past, looking at its tradition. If you suddenly change the body plan very drastically, then it can make the animal more likely to like fail,
Sure.
or to die, or to
Yes,
go into
sometimes societies need radical transformations in a short amount of time to survive.
Exactly. Okay, so
Abolishing slavery, for example, was pretty good. Although I do think you can make the historical case that, given that other countries abolished slavery without a civil war, that it could have been done without a civil war, but I don't know.
yes, I mean,
maybe it was best that it
like the UK, for example, we just kind of decided we'd pay all the slave owners, and that kind of got rid of the problem of having
sounds like something the British
slavery
would
to
do.
begin with. Without any war.
Listen, you had a lot of money from stealing all that fucking gold from Egypt, right?
Sure, yeah. We still have it in the museum.
True.
Okay, but here's the thing. Okay, so you have, I think you're not. I don't know if I'm explaining it properly. So, there is a way in which you can organize a society that works if you retain everything as is. But if the environment drastically changes, maybe that former body plan still kind of works perfectly well.
Yeah, but probably not. It's like the Second
or
Amendment.
maybe not.
The Second Amendment.
And maybe
why do we have the Second Amendment? I know you'll never understand because you've been British brained. But the reason God's chosen people, America, the reason we have the Second Amendment is to prevent tyranny. We said, hey, we want a well-regulated militia. However, with the advent of like nuclear weapons and tanks and chemical weapons, we realized, just saying everyone should have the right to bear arms. That was good enough for the 1780s or whatever, when you had muskets and shit, but in the current environment, arms has expanded to such new things that we need to reinterpret that in a more strict way. So you take what is good and you adapt it to the modern environment. And if you don't, then you let George Soros own tanks and chemical weapons, and I don't think anybody wants that. Well, some people would, but most people wouldn't. I don't want David Koch and George Soros owning private military armies competing in the streets.
Are you aware of how like
Dumb I sound? Yes, unfortunately.
Are you aware of how like gun rights kind of guns are working in Switzerland?
Yeah, aren't
which
they
is-
all you serve in the military and then you get to keep your gun?
Exactly, yes.
Great. Love
And
it.
so guns is
Good
kind
idea.
of okay, here's the thing. So I do wonder to some extent whether the situation in the US kind of has adapted to a point and kind of changed the way it works in Switzerland, maybe in part because there isn't as much unity, that there's way more individualism in the US, and so
Yeah, much
you
to
don't
our
have
detriment,
people-
I think.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I would say it's a good example of something that I don't know to what extent it is a good thing, because maybe it works in Switzerland because they have certain ways of the culture works. People are fairly, relatively collectivist, not
Sure.
compared to like maybe East Asia, but they are relatively collectivist, and so they have the guns for the society. Meanwhile, in the US, it's so individualistic. Maybe the gun rights don't really work as well. Maybe they shouldn't have gone there to begin with. And so this is an example of something that maybe works in a situation in a culture. But if you can't just take that thing, move it to another country, and expect it to have the same
True.
outcome.
Yeah. It's like trying to run a Mac program on a PC. The underlying software is not compatible, even though it seems like, oh, well, this is a computer, that's a computer. It's like there's a lot of underlying code that needs to be adapted as well. The degree to which each individual has a collective orientation versus individual orientation, perhaps. One more question or point of contention before I move on to the next caller.
Go ahead.
No. You have. I'll give you the
Oh,
opportunity. You have
me?
a question
Okay,
or
so,
point of
okay, yes,
contention.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Also, real quick, Christian Baller, you are free to argue with me next. Although this is the last stream, so never going to happen. But theoretically, if I was around Saturday morning for some other unrelated reason, perhaps. Roses are red, violets are blue. PF Young is here to school you. That's not directed to you, Mr. Britishman. That's directed
yes.
towards
Okay,
all of
so,
the autistic haters.
okay, so in the US, I think you would agree. There's maybe. I would argue that, for example, the right and the left have almost become like two different cultures, right? The
Sure.
way they understand like how you should deal with your family, for example, or like how things, whether you should have guns, how like guns play in your life, or like there's certain things that the values have changed between like the left and the right. They've become more divided. People don't even marry each other. I mean, that's basically like the way people treat religions, right? Like you're not supposed to marry someone of a different religion.
Sure.
So I do wonder whether you need a different system of governing maybe left-wing people and right-wing people, and maybe there should be states where there's only left-wing people and only right-wing people, and each one kind of has
maybe.
their own rules and rules and their own governing structure.
Yeah,
Maybe
well, that
there
was
shouldn't be centrism at all.
Well, that was the original purpose of federalism. Is each state is its own entity, and the balance of right wing versus left wing that each state strikes is a little bit different. Perhaps California has a different culture than Alabama or New York. So I agree with that, but it's sort of like saying, well, some football teams, American football, real football, some football
Fake
teams.
football.
American football teams some of those teams would be good if they only had, if everyone was 6'5" and 300 pounds, like a lineman. It's like, no, it wouldn't. Every team needs to have a mix of people who are quick and people who are strong. If everyone was just quick and weak, they'd get overrun. And if everyone was strong, they wouldn't have enough mobility to score. So like it's the meta emerges from that. Do you play League of Legends by any chance?
No, I don't.
That's a good thing for you, by the way. Okay, but you will often find in video games, a well-balanced video game, that a balanced team composition emerges. Right? You do not want your team to just be conservative or just be progressive.
Okay, but okay. Look at your example. So you have different players, different body plans in like American football, instead of real football. But but you also, for example, what is like you're the fastest swimmer in the U.S., the one who like won
Michael
something
Phelps?
Michael Phelps. Okay, you can't have Michael Phelps in American football, right? There is like certain like maybe body plans and different like um people that are built to be in different environments. And so sure, it can work together in a certain context, right? You can have different
Sure,
types
I
of
agree with
people
that.
working
In
American football.
yeah. For example, like someone who is very progressive needs to be in an environment that allows them to express their creativity and create
Sure,
art or something like
yes.
that. It's like, well, does every person need to be making art? No, not at all. But like a successful society, on balance, has a diverse team composition, but locally those individuals might be adapted to specific spaces. But
Yes.
fair?
Yeah, and to some extent, yeah. Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, that's
Excellent.
it.
I do got to move on to the next call. I appreciate it. These are good questions.
course.
Yes.
That's
Listen,
it's
and let me be
great,
clear.
Great talking to you.
Nobody loves the British more than I do. I would like to apologize for what my ancestors did to you.
Throwing tea into the ocean, unbelievable.
It's been that's fair. It's been embarrassing for you guys. But
Oh yes, to take care, wonderful lad.
Godspeed, Gerard. All right.
Godspeed.
Peace. All right. We're gonna go through these. I got Gunga, Elad, Ryan, Castaway, Jesse, Gabriel, Brandon, and then I believe that's it for the final stream at PFM Media. Here we go. Gunga, 3, 2,
Howdy.
Son of
I've
God.
Hey, I've got a mug that has your name on it.
Hey, look at that.
Look at that.
Should I start? I think I should start.
I forgot I had this, and I was like, oh yeah, Paul.
There you go.
Also, this is for the JJ fans. It's also inclusive, so you got Pavel, Russian, all the different names. Pablo.
I don't like it. I want my name only. Let's go to the next person. No, I'm just kidding. Gunga, here you come. Back on. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to capture the JJ fans out
That's
there.
fair. That's fair. Nobody loves JJ's fans more than I do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's sad that Destiny's bullying is kicking you off of streaming.
I'm not naming any names. I love everyone equally.
No.
But anyway, what is your question or point of contention? Jesus Christ.
So, I wanted to talk about, I guess, pride of
Mamma
the country,
mia, it's going
or
slow.
Not necessarily nationalism, because
I'm not going to be able to do this.
Kind of goes down a certain path.
That's fair. I like nationalism.
I wonder if I should pop
Yeah,
off his
but it's
stream. No, I
interesting
should
that
turn off my
we
stream
really
until
don't
he invites me
have
on.
that on
But I want to
the
stream. I want to research stuff. I
There's
just want to make sure I don't
generally
miss
nationalism
if
more
he
so
does invite me
on
on.
the right side of
Mm,
and I was in Boy Scouts whenever I was younger, and it helped give me an appreciation for that. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are on where people should engage with their civic identity and those kind of nationalistic feelings, because it seems like not everyone is like proud to be an American and not proud to take part in their community. And some people like to shit on everything that we do. But I don't think it's mutually exclusive to be an American and then also be a jackass on the world stage. I think that there can be a balance there.
As an enlightened centrist, I subscribe to the idea that every virtue sits in between two vices. I believe this was an Aristotelian idea, right? Like confidence is the balance between arrogance and insecurity, right? What would you? What's another example? I can't even think of any. Anyway, there's a whole that's virtue. Aristotelian mean it's the good is between two things. Nationalism.
You can be right. You can be critical. You can be critical of the United States and things that we've done.
Yeah, or you can be jingoistic. That's the term. So like jingoistic is no matter what my country does, it's good. No matter how many Palestinians we bomb, it's all good. It's all fine. Fuck that.
But what do you think that most people would engage with that, or like where would they get that kind of sense of I'm a member of this community that I need to participate?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's lacking. I think that's a big problem. I'm a big fan of. In theory, if we had like mandatory civil service where everyone dedicated some portion of their life to connecting with their fellow citizens, regardless of class, regardless of religion or ideology or whatever, to all come together and say, yeah, just like, after high school, a lot of people go to college. It's like, if I were king of the country, It would be after you turn 18. Everyone spends, I don't know, year, 2 years, some whatever. Devil's in the details, but 2 years or something, going to some military base or civil service base, and they go, pick up trash in local neighborhoods and do volunteer work and, all kinds of shit. And I think that would be a good way to create a sense of national. Israel is well known for having a lot of national pride, and it's required to join the IDF there. Structurally, I think that's good. And I would
There's some existentialism there. I think it's also driven by fear and necessity.
Well, yeah, sure. There's many things that go into it. But the fundamental practice, I think, is sound. My experience for this is I did jury duty one time in my life, and I showed up to the courthouse, and it was almost like a movie. Like someone wrote a script, and like who were the jurors? It was like I was a social studies teacher, a construction worker, a lawyer, some like 22-year-old college girl. It was just like every possible slice of life. And I remember thinking, nowhere in my entire life have I ever experienced something like this, because I go to my local high school, my local church, my job, whatever, and I'm on this track that is fundamentally separate from many of my fellow citizens. And there's just something wrong about that, I think. And so I think people should engage with their civic, responsibilities and communities more often.
It seems like almost like public education, or maybe even private education, in terms of like K through 12 is really the only way that people would even be introduced to that. Civic
Unfortunately, yeah, I think that's not good.
Kind of a shame, but it's interesting in Canada because going to JJ, it's kind of the reverse, in which like the left and right are kind of flipped on the national identity, the nationalism. People on the right are more anti-Canadian. They're more pro-U.S. versus the
interesting
the Liberal Party there. So, yeah, it's just interesting thing to note and see where that.
That's fair. Well, listen, when Jocko Willink takes over the United States in an enlightened centrist revolution that I will be supporting, like Rasputin, I will be encouraging him to implement mandatory civil service. So,
can you be anti-establishment and then also pro-America at the same time?
Oh, of course.
That's another question.
Of course. Well, yeah, it depends what you mean by anti. It's like I'm anti-establishment insofar as I think the current establishment is run by a group of individuals who are incompetent. I think if those individuals were replaced, then the establishment would be fine. Right? It's like the board of a company. Like if a company is run by a board of incompetent fools, and then that board is replaced, well, the company itself is not the fundamental problem. It's people running that company. So I'm not anti that company per se. I'm anti the current group of people running it, and I'm anti the current establishment. The Harvard-educated globalist type folks who have the no humans legal ideology. I just think that's not good.
Gotcha.
Fair?
Well, I'll keep it short and sweet.
Beautiful.
It's always good watching you, Paul.
Appreciate it. This is the last one. I know, it's terrible. How long have you been watching my videos, out of curiosity?
At least a few months now, maybe 6 months.
Okay, right on. What was the
Sorry,
first video
I was
you
a JJ
saw?
capture, so
It's fine. Like I said, nobody loves JJ's artists more than I do. It's fine.
hey, but I'm not a Canadian, so.
There you go. Well, hey, there's a little good in everybody, right?
All right. Well, but my
Everyone's redeemable.
fiance is so. Or.
Okay.
Anyway, that's complicated.
Well,
But
that's
so long.
that's fair.
Godspeed.
all right. Godspeed, Gunga. Peace. Okay. I got Elod, Castaway, Jesse, Gabriel, Brandon. We're gonna roll through this here, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be done for 3 hours. This is great. I don't understand how people can stream for 12 hours a day. I think that is psychologically unhealthy. in my opinion. Anyway, Elod, coming out in 3,
I don't know
2.
if I have any other political stuff on here.
Good sir.
Okay, so I
You're
need
muted.
to expand my political.
Can you hear me?
I mean, I've done a
Shabbat
ton
shalom,
of
brother.
notes and argumentation on a few specific things.
Actually, it's the end of Shabbat, so
Israel, Palestine.
Oh, is
it's,
it? All right. Well, L'chaim or something.
It's
that
pretty much
doesn't
it.
matter. Doesn't matter.
That's fair.
I'm sorry, my
Some
English is
historical
not
stuff.
the best. Okay.
Mine is probably worse. So go ahead. What's up?
Okay. So I want to convince you that the allyship between the U.S. and Israel is good.
All right. Tall order, but I will try anything once. Go ahead.
Okay. So first, do we agree that the U.S. has interests in the Middle East?
Be outside of Israel, theoretically.
Yeah, yeah, outside. So, for
Sure.
example, like in Saudi Arabia, the oil is important. Okay.
I think
I'm not sure how much he knows about this. This is always the curious thing when I hear him talking about Israel. I'm not sure how much he knows about the history and whatnot. He tends to speak. He does seem to know some because he made that Netanyahu video in which he did display, or he at least managed to scrounge up clips of Netanyahu's, which are very damning. So it made me start to wonder if he does actually know more than I thought. But previously, when he would talk about Israel, he would talk about how it's supposed to be a secular state, but it's very not, which is also true. It's dominated to a frightening degree by religious orthodoxy, and they tend to have a lot of power. They're also having loads of kids. They have loads more kids nowadays because they're trying to stay ahead of the Arab population, who has lots of kids. And most of the secular Israelis, most of the more liberal or progressive-minded Israelis, most of the Israelis who want peace are generally much less likely to have kids, or less likely to have many kids. So that's one of the reasons Israel has to be constantly recruiting from overseas. That's one of the reasons they're willing to pay to bring kids over, give them a good time. There is a lot of legitimacy to that stuff, and I suppose you could see it as undermining the U.S. even just on that fact. Like, they'll bring people over and they'll try to get them, whatever, tipsy or seduced by the female soldiers. They'll try to bunk them in places with a lot of other young people, show them that Israel's a great place to be and whatnot. This seems like generally just widely accepted and kind of one of the strategies they use to try to get young people who aren't necessarily religious ultra-Orthodox to go to Israel, to keep increasing their population, stay abreast of the Arab population, maintain, cultural hegemony, or not hegemony, but stability. That's the thing. That's where we would differ, I think. I don't believe there's really cultural hegemony in Israel, and I don't believe it's nearly as totalitarian or authoritarian as P.F. Jung seems to think. And when he's spoken about in the past, I've gotten the feeling that he may have not read about any of the history or anything like that. He might just be talking about AIPAC and how it has an unusual degree of influence over the U.S. On both sides of the aisle, and that this should be concerning, which probably it should. But it sounded a little bit more hazy, like I haven't been confident how much he knows. And one of the areas that would manifest would be the U.S.'s interest in the Middle East, which they're discussing now, and I have it on mute, so let's unmute that.
Like the soldiers.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, and I hope that all of my fear-mongering stays that way, and it remains in the realm of memes, and it never actually materializes.
But let's say the U.S. stops being an ally to Israel, right?
Sure.
Let's imagine that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S.
Saudi
stops providing ammunition and tanks to Israel, and destroys we have F-16s, I think that's the latest model, and we need to put new.
The thing is, nowadays, Saudi and Jordan and Egypt, a lot of these Arab states that are trying to modernize, there's this Iranian Saudi divide, and they're trying to establish their own kind of economic web, and they found Israel an extremely useful trading partner. It's extremely useful. All the people that are connected to Iran, all the people that sort of align themselves politically or ideologically with Iran, seem to fall apart, at least in several areas, So, yeah, the states which are generally more aligned with the West, with trading with the U.S., Israel, have been doing better and better and better. They've been doing military exercises together. They've been training together. This means, Saudi and Israel primarily is the one I would know of, but also Jordan even. Egypt, I'm not as sure. But these are, very stable countries in that region, and I feel like if the U.S. were to back out, there would still be enough interest for all of this network of places against Iran, against China, against whatever sort of chaos could descend, with Russian influence, Turkish influence, maybe, to where they would still support Israel as much as it needed. It's also just a highly productive, efficient place on its own. It is small. It doesn't need allies. But I don't feel that their hatred for it, the hatred of the people, would be unique enough to overwhelm all the... They're generally becoming more secular societies, at least in so much as they're governed. There's still a lot of sentiment against the Jewish people from the commoners, so to speak. Just for background context, I've lived in Israel. I've spent a bit of time in Palestine, a little bit, and I've lived in Egypt. And I've generally spent, a fair amount of time in that part of the world in my early backpacking days. So that's just anecdotal. It doesn't speak to any sort of empirical or academic expertise. But I do feel like I've connected with the common culture at a basic level, everyday level, in order to understand some of how the public sentiment. The public is becoming more and more secular, still extremely anti-Semitic, but you can see that the government is not necessarily acting on that same anti-Semitic sentiment. It is very much more focused on economy, military, setting itself against Iran, and so on. Yeah.
We're going to get rid of the settlers. We're going to
Sorry, that was probably really
support
loud.
people like Ben Gvir. Then other Middle Eastern countries would go, okay, we're more happy to have, Israel around. And, Saudi Arabia was on that path prior to October 7th. And there's a lot of normalization. So normalization between Israel and its neighbors can occur. And I think getting all the settlers out would help that path. But I believe the current Israeli government is occupied by a bunch of far-right ethno-supremacists, Jewish supremacists. And I think that that's wrong. And I don't want my tax dollars supporting them.
All right, sure.
So is he making a moral argument or an
one more
economic
question, okay?
argument?
Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So
because you could believe that, but there's loads of allies we have and tax dollars we send to probably
like
worse
Candace
places
Owens,
and less
Nick Fuentes,
strategically important
they're
places,
not
depending.
good people, but they are right about Israel. So I want to poke you a little bit about that. Okay?
I would certainly not say that they're right about Israel on everything. They are sometimes, or even, I don't know. I don't watch them enough to tell you the proportion, but
This is what I want to ask him about. I want to ask him about some recent comments about Candace Owens that she says true things. And it's made me curious how much he knows, because in his past videos, he's talked about Netanyahu. He's talked about he doesn't want his tax dollars going there, but that's pretty much all he's said. I haven't gotten the sense that he knows too much of where the money actually goes and whatnot. So anyway, I don't know that much either about that. I would say I know a bit about the history and international law and stuff, but I want to ask him about Candace Owens and conspiracy-minded people and how they selectively choose their facts and then broadcast it to this audience that then goes and repeats it 3 levels down. It becomes an utterly simplistic argument. And I wonder if he thinks Candace Owens is good faith, because she seems extremely not to me recently.
So I think when you talk about, like, I would say Nazi people or very anti-Semitic people, I think instead of, like, they aren't really right, because it's like a not working clock writes twice a day.
Testing.
Yeah. So they criticize Israel, but they would say anything to shit on the Jews.
Testing.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, so, probably.
So I don't think you can say they're right sometimes. You see what I mean?
Well, like the example you just gave, you said a broken clock is right twice a day. That doesn't mean the clock is working. It doesn't mean it's a good clock. It doesn't mean that Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes should be people who we look up to as thought leaders. I am simply acknowledging the reality that Candace Owens says many true things about Israel.
Oh, okay.
Like the problem of Jewish supremacy. That's a real problem. Right, you're probably more aware than anyone of the Israeli settler attitude.
I would say it's more like an Israeli supremacy. Like every country thinks it's supreme. You see what I'm like?
No, but hold on. The reason I call it Jewish supremacy is because it's rooted in the Orthodox Jewish belief that God chose the Jews and gave them a specific piece of land. Are you atheist or are you religious?
I'm atheist.
Okay, so you and I agree that just like the Christians who say the earth was 6,000 years old, or the Muslims who want to implement Sharia law, the Jews who say God said we get this specific piece of land, that's ridiculous.
Yes, I agree. But
okay.
Do you agree
it's not Israeli, because I wouldn't put you in that category.
Yeah, sure, but do you agree that Jews lived here, like
2,000 years ago?
2,000 years ago, yeah.
I think that's completely irrelevant.
Okay, that's fair.
Because if I were to say, okay, that's a valid reason for who should get the land now, I wouldn't be in America, because certainly
Yeah.
2,000 years
yeah.
ago, and then the Romans too. You could say, like, what if the Italians walked into France and said, technically this city was originally a Roman settlement. It's like there's a statute of limitations on murder, maybe not murder. There's a statute of limitations on a lot of crimes, and
okay.
2,000 years is a long time. So I don't buy that argument as being
Yeah,
valid.
okay. Yeah, I get that. Oh, okay. So I think we basically agree on everything. Okay.
Fair enough. Look, listen. I'm glad that people like you. I'm glad that people like you exist, Elad, because you clearly and that's why I don't say Israeli supremacy, because I know for a fact there are many, many good Israelis, and I want Israel to exist and be a peaceful and safe society. It's very difficult on how to get there. People disagree, but like my issue is not with Israelis fundamentally. It's with the subset of Israelis who are the religious Zionist Jewish supremacist extremists. That's who my problem is with. And I will say, because Netanyahu's in charge and they do seem to have more power than they should, I will admit my criticism of Israel often overlaps with that, but it is very important to me, despite what people would say, that I do separate that and go a atheist Jew to blame, like what Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes do, specifically Nick Fuentes, when they say Jewish people as a race are a problem. I'm like, no matter what Israel does, you will never get me to agree to that statement, because that's fucking nonsense. It's not, a race cannot be problematic in and of itself. An ideology can be, and certainly Judaism, is related to the race, because the Jews are God's chosen people. They mix.
Let's say extremist Zionist Judaism. Like,
yes,
I would say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
Extremist
Orthodox Judaism that requires people to say that Israel is a divine state, and therefore it cannot fundamentally do wrong. I disagree with. If Ben Gvir became prime minister, I would not be.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I want to live with one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. As citizens of US, the one thing you need to do to prevent war crimes in Palestine is call for Israeli elections, because right now, if we do elections, there probably will be a leftist government. Okay, so the one thing you should advocate for is pushing Israel to do elections.
I like that.
That's true.
Now you know what people are going to say, though.
Israel,
oh my God, Paul,
you're
interfering with Israel's democracy. Israel tabs. Why is an American calling for elections to be held?
I don't think that. I think it's more democracy. It's bringing more democracy, and that's
I like that.
And that's what I like about the U.S. It brings democracy to the Middle East. Okay.
It tries to, at least. That's fair. But hey, I do got to move on to the next caller. But I appreciate you calling in. Thank you, Elad.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the conversation.
Yes.
Bye bye.
Bye now. All right, I got Jesse, Gabriel, Brandon, and Castaway. Here we go. Jesse Tate. Coming on. Hold on one sec. Let's get these comments. I can't keep up with the comments. What do we got here? Just arrest him? I'd say give him to Hamas. Let's exchange Ben Gvir for the Hamas leadership. Hi, Paul and chat. Hi, Ali Cattails. At the airport, about to visit a friend in San Diego. Thanks, Ali. Appreciate you tuning into the last stream ever. Anyway. We could just manipulate our funding of Israel. That's okay. Anyway, Jesse Tate coming on in 3. Hold on. Let me turn on this fucking ceiling fan. 1 second. It's so goddamn hot in Texas. Nobody told me that when I moved down here. Is this actually the last stream? Well, I've been called so many names by so many people. And it hurts my feelings, and I don't want to do this if it hurts my feelings. Anyway, Jesse Tate coming on 3, 2.
Howdy, howdy.
Jesse Tate, God tier libertarian. I'm not sure that's a thing.
How's the audio? Is the audio okay?
The audio's great.
Okay. I'm also streaming. I presume that's okay. I'm super new to this and don't know the etiquette. Yeah.
You presumed wrong.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. But yeah, tell me if there's something with the audio. But okay.
No, you're good.
Actually, I'm not God tier libertarian, but I was curious. I guess I had a question about your talk with Destiny and something you said about Candace Owens, and then also what particularly you don't like about libertarianism. Like,
okay, before we do that,
okay,
real quick, I'm a performing monkey, so when people throw me treats, I have to do something.
Uh-huh.
Top 10 pound for pound debaters of all time. That's like, I don't know. That's like saying what are the top 10 wrestlers. It's all fake. A good debater is Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Brett Weinstein, Richard Dawkins, Eric Weinstein, stuff like that. People who think and try to articulate what they think. That's who makes a good debater. Anyway,
Sam Harris is very good.
Yes, I agree.
So
what was your question?
Let's see. Okay, so the primary thing you would dislike about libertarianism would be like you think we need institutions. Is that right? You think that we?
My primary thing is freedom is not an end in and of itself. Or I guess I'm a believer in positive freedom.
Okay.
Much more so than negative freedom.
Okay.
Like, for example, if I drive by a bunch of homeless drug addicts on the street, like I would say, they're not free. And a libertarian would say, well, the government's not interfering with them, so they're technically free. And I'd say, no, they're technically not free. They're technically in a state of mental hell. And if you think that's free, then you and I have very different definitions of freedom. And so I disagree with the libertarian understanding of negative freedom as the end that we should pursue.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think I agree. So would you say, you're not religious in any way?
I probably believe in God.
Okay.
I go to church. I started going to church recently.
Ah, really? Christian church? Yeah. Orthodox?
Yeah, but Presbyterian.
Oh.
But I don't know. I sit in the back.
Okay.
In the pews. I don't really talk to people
about,
what did this Bible verse mean to you today? I'm like,
Huh.
I don't know. A little too literalist for me. Anyway, continue though.
Okay, no, I mean, that was a smaller question. I guess I would probably largely agree. It does seem like, I don't know if you think there needs to be, you don't have some sort of particular or essentialist value hierarchy in which like something is held as desirable, like freedom or duty or charity or worshiping God. You would say in some sort of utilitarian way, like whatever is going to make us healthiest given our nature.
I would say meaning is the highest value on the hierarchy, which is a very problematic statement because how do you define meaning, so on and so forth.
But like meaning, freedom would only be useful as it informed meaning and free speech.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, like free speech, I suppose. And I'm a small L libertarian. Like generally, of course, I should be free to do what I want often. But the difference between freedom and meaning is a instinct. So in a practical way, it's like the thing that we should be aiming for is a society that maximizes the ability of people to experience meaning. That's vague, but that's a better framework for society than we need to maximize freedom over all else. And by freedom, we mean negative freedom, free from government interference.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's not good.
So how do you think we would arbitrate that? Like, for example, with big tech or censorship media, how do we arbitrate as a society, like just popular vote?
Perfect example.
Yeah.
If I were king of the world, if I were king of the United States, I would send the military into the Meta headquarters and the I guess really just Meta and YouTube, Meta, Google, and Twitter, X. I would send the military into those headquarter buildings and I would point guns at them and say, right now, take your algorithms and make them post them on the internet and make them transparent. And all the libertarians would go, well, but private property, and I'd go, fuck that.
I agree. I think that's an excellent idea. Yeah.
And we wouldn't have to do it for Twitter because technically they already do it.
Yeah.
Although they could probably release more. But so that's a very anti-classical libertarian thing that I'm like, to me, that's self-evidently the right thing to do.
Okay.
And
So
in
like
some sense, that
maximal
increases
transparency.
freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different kind of. It's like, well, corporate property rights versus freedom of it's like we could play. I could make all of these arguments in terms of freedom if I just used positive freedom instead of negative freedom. I'm gonna do a video called "Why Democracy and Freedom Are Cringe," and it'll be exploring this precise.
Okay.
example.
I voted for that one. I think that was in one of your polls
Nice.
recently.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Did that one win? I forget.
No, the next one I'm doing is why terminally online debates actually matter,
Okay.
which will be a very advanced look at the sneak peek, everyone. The memetic adoption curve, the MAC. It's a very sophisticated tool in the field of applied sociology, which I've decided to start. This is my new thing. I've meme-smithed enlightened centrism. It works to some degree. I'm going to do applied sociology now as my new meme, which is a made-up field that I'm creating. Going from there.
That sounds good. Okay, my main thing was kind of in vein with that, maybe not. When you were talking to Destiny, well, do you think you're generally conspiracy prone? Like when you were talking to Destiny, you were talking about Candace Owens, and you know how she says true things, and you just said it a few minutes ago as well.
Yes.
And I agree. I have to admit, I haven't listened to her too much recently. I've
listened to like hours and hours of her podcast because I'm doing the Candace Owens Champion Spotlight. So that's a thing that many of the people I talk to seem to not have any experience with.
Okay.
Which is part of the problem.
That could be. I've just moved back to the U.S. and just started paying attention to politics recently. So I've been like doing philosophy for a long time, and never really paid attention to politics. Now I am. But it seems to me, going back through her stuff, you have to admit that this is the tendency with like conspiracists say. I'm not gonna, categorize her, or the Weinsteins, for example, would be other ones who they seem, sharp. They certainly have a lot of fact gathering resources or networks available. I don't know how many people she has working under her, but she's able to go back and like that one obscure, whatever Jewish guy you mentioned to Destiny that was secret.
Solomon Morell?
Yes, Solomon Morell. I'm not sure how obscure he was, but she'll talk about that. She'll talk about
obscure to people who never learned about him.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just like to many kids nowadays, Joseph Stalin or Mao
is obscure.
Well, Pol Pot. We never learned about it in school. We had 3 or 4 units about Nazi Germany, but we never learned about the Cambodian genocide. And you could say, well, because the U.S. education system was racist, it was Europeans that died, so it mattered more. It's like, well, maybe.
Maybe.
Obscure is a relative term.
Right.
But go ahead.
So, she'll mention that. She'll mention, actually, it turns out the first books the Nazis were burning were about trans ideology, and she'll mention
Magnus Hirschfeld.
Yeah, and the burning of the USS Liberty, whatever. She'll go in and she'll find like an individual or a quote or one kind of dodgy situation, and she'll talk about it, but then she won't actually dive in and like do research. She won't do like a in-depth comprehensive analysis of, let's see, there's different sides to this issue, and let's get to the bottom of it and find the truth.
So like what's an example you're thinking of?
Well, the Nazis and the trans ideology was what I was thinking of when I first hopped on the call.
Okay.
Now in that one,
Republic type stuff.
Yeah, obviously, I think she would say publicly, kind of definitively, she doesn't support Nazism or whatever. But that with the audience she has, with the demographic, once it filters down into the layers of the common voter, they're not doing any research on their own. They're not doing any rigorous sort of analysis. Mm-hmm. I feel like you can say accurately that most of Candace Owens' audience, anyone who's listening to her regularly, is going to be very ideologically dedicated to just her one side of the narrative, right?
Sure.
So
that's plausible and perhaps probable.
Okay. Yeah. Doesn't it seem like with this sort of conspiracy type person, they'll selectively choose their facts, they'll kind of throw them to their audience and say, I'm just not sure why we never talk about that, or we never learned that, that's interesting, and then they'll move on without actually going into an in-depth analysis and actually figuring out like, okay, why has this been the narrative?
Well, so that's why I'm asking, what is an example where you felt she brought up something specific and then like left it just out to dry and didn't go deep into it? Because in my experience, she does the opposite. She goes on
Really?
these autistic rabbit holes, like about Solomon Morel. I didn't know who that was.
Okay.
And then she explained for like 5-10 minutes this and that. He was extradited or tried to be extradited by the Polish government for, running a concentration camp.
I have to admit, I don't know much about Solomon Morel. Well, I'd be
Neither
curious
did
to
I,
hear about
but
it.
Candace Owens
But-
taught me more.
Okay. Yeah, no, maybe you can tell me in a second. But with the trans Nazi book stuff, so I've listened to probably like 5 or 6 hours in the past couple weeks. That was mostly back about that. So that was like several months ago. And then her conversation with Piers Morgan, where, and Bill Maher, where she'll say okay, so the moon landing stuff. I don't know. Was it real? I don't know. And then they'll laugh and she'll say, I mean, that's just what, and then they'll just like laugh and then move on. Or she'll just,
Or she says, I'm not a flat earther, I'm not a round earther.
yeah. Like it's the whole just asking questions thing, or like, I don't know why we're not allowed to think about this critically. And I don't know why we're not allowed to question. And pretty soon you get this, this approach to logic by which like all context, all societal authorities, all institutions are dismissed, and you're just going in and finding a few facts that kind of reinforce your narrative, and then it doesn't feel like there's any sort of openness to actual dialogue or engagement with what the other side is saying, but it's kind of just, we're going to throw out these contradictory facts, a ton of them at once, to make the institutions seem irreputable.
She does do that sometimes, but she debates all kinds of people. She debated Rabbi Barclay, who's
That's true. I saw that one.
Debated several other people. Yeah, and let me be very clear. I don't think no matter who you are, you could watch the debate between Candace Owens and Rabbi Barclay and say that Candace Owens did not come out looking the better of the two.
I agree, definitely.
Yeah. And Rabbi Barclay is like a influential figure in politics, like behind the scenes. So
that's true.
That's problematic, in my opinion.
But as this affects her audience, surely it seems like you must agree that they're listening to that and they're thinking, okay, can't trust New York Times, can't trust whoever, good, can't trust COVID vaccine. And then they're going out and they're talking to all their friends who are all saying the same thing. And then pretty soon you just get people who are, this is what Destiny's probably concerned about, so disconnected from any sort of, so distrustful of any sort of, broader network of, fact or discourse that they are not going to be very accessible. And, yeah, I mean, that's my main thing. So when you say Candace Owens says some true things, it's like she says some true things, but they're all underneath this overarching kind of push towards a very conspiracist or counterculture narrative that could have some value, but because she's so fixated on finding things that just verify her or confirm her, confirm that, yeah, I don't know. They seem to create this general audience that's very.
I think everything you said is true.
Okay. So if she
that
says,
does not change the fact that the statement Candace Owens says true things is true.
But they're in service of, yeah.
Well, this was Destiny's point, and and there is you can use truth to peddle falsehood. Like the example he gave, that is a good example, is like, you could say that I know a 30-year-old man who had sex with a 14-year-old girl. It's like, well, what is the impression that gives immediately? Oh, this guy's a pedophile. It's like, okay, the detail I left out is, I know a 30-year-old man who, when he was 14, had sex with his high school girlfriend who was also 14. 16 years ago or whatever. It's like, oh, that completely changes the context. You can say a single piece of truth that is technically true. I know a 30-year-old man who did have sex with a 14-year-old when he was 14, to convey a lie. So in the extremes, I think that's true, that does happen. I don't think that applies to Candace Owens just yet.
Okay.
Because like when she says, I just had a kid, and when I see the endless number of dead Palestinian children on my timeline, it sickens me. I do not disbelieve that whatsoever. I believe.
Oh, I don't. She feels, to be honest. Do you think she's good faith? She feels slimy to me when she says stuff like that.
She says, I believe that motivates her though.
Okay.
You can be. You've seen Game of Thrones?
Mm-hmm.
What did Tyrion say about Cersei? Cersei is very good at using her true feelings to manipulate other people or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, well, Cersei loved her kids. I don't think anyone would dispute that Cersei loved her kids and was motivated by all those reasons. And I think Candace Owens is the same way. I do not think it would be good if Candace Owens was had decision-making power on important issues like related to whether or not evolution should be taught in schools, right? She denies
Right.
evolution. I regard that as deeply problematic, more so than most probably, because so much of my worldview is built upon the Jordan Peterson maps of meaning approach, which is all evolutionary based. So for her to deny evolution is to deny essentially one of my fundamental axioms and belief systems. And I certainly would feel threatened by that. Now, of course, I've never seen any proof that monkeys turn into humans. So, maybe I'm wrong, but like, I'm under no illusion that Candace Owens says dumb shit, and you'll see when the Champion Spotlight eventually comes out. There'll be a plenty good compilation of all the dumb shit that Candace Owens says. But it's a practical matter of, I'm not going to qualify saying, oh, well, Candace Owens says true things, but she says all these wrong things. It's like, nope, Candace Owens says things that are true. And if you're a Candace Owens fan, or you listen to Candace Owens regularly, I do not blame you whatsoever, any more than I blame a Hassan Piker fan.
But
Hassan
even the
Piker
fact that
says
you're saying
true things.
this person says true things from time to time, this fact kind of belies all this underlying stuff of like, they're a legitimate source to some degree. You're going to listen to them to some degree.
They are.
And you're going to probably find, if you follow that down to its conclusion, that you're networked with all these other people who are a little bit crazy, I would say.
I mean, you could say that for any belief system.
That's
like
true.
Science.
That's
right?
true.
Like the hardcore, what did Dr. Fauci say? I am science. They're attacking me. Is that as obviously self-evidently extreme as what Candace Owens says? No, but it's pretty fucked up. So
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that's all good. The Palestine stuff and the compassion, I feel like appeals to compassion. It's so not what she's supposed to represent, and you can't let kind of unchanneled compassion, just impulse compassion, be your guiding star when it comes to like international law and whatnot. Then you get like, that's what all the college protesters are, is basically just
reflexive empathy.
reflexive
is not-
empathy. There you go.
Yeah, it's not a good heuristic, but I do not doubt that is what drives her. And part of that is projection, because I see those images of dead Palestinian kids, and then I see the Israeli Minister of National Security praising the soldiers that kill those kids, saying that the mass shooter Baruch Goldstein is a hero, saying that the rights of his Jews matter more than the rights of Arabs. And I see those juxtaposed, and I go, a lot of bad things in the world, but my tax dollars are going to this guy, and I don't like that.
That makes sense.
Fair?
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Any other final point?
I don't think so. That's about it. Oh, I'd be
Jesse.
curious.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Well, I'd be curious. Are you going to do more philosophical stuff in the future moving forward? Because I really like those. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm probably going to lean more into. I don't like talking about politics. It's for nerds. And
Okay.
I don't spend enough time on Wikipedia to be properly equipped to talk about it, apparently.
Excellent.
So,
Alrighty.
applied sociology, like I said.
Oh, there
Be
you
on the
go.
lookout.
Yeah.
It's a new emerging field. All right. Appreciate it, Jesse. Godspeed.
Ciao.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got two more. Gabriel and Brandon. Gabriel, you've been on before.